Welcome to Super Mark Z, where today I'll be making a theory that might be against another theory I made, but I'm also still making it. If I sound weird, it's because I'm sick and I have the cold, the enemy of man. But this theory is about Super Android 13. I'm here to state that, unlike common belief, I can find a way that the Super Android 13 movie can both happen in the future and be canon. So let me explain by starting with a small amount of evidence first, right after I explain what I mean. Most people say that the Super Android 13 movie is not canon and has no way of ever being canon to Dragon Ball in Z, and all the ways because of the first scene and a few other scenes. But now I'm here to disprove that notion entirely. This is Gohan from the Super Android 13 movie, and this is Gohan during the training part where we saw him training with Piccolo and Goku before the androids arrived. These two versions of Gohan look very similar to one another when it comes to appearance, meaning the Android 13 movie is possible or can take place in the 3 years before the androids in both timelines. And here's one of an evidence that it took place in the future timeline. In this scene, Trunks says that in the future Android 13 isn't there because he dies right now today, and most people took it like Trunks is actually taunting Android 13 and that he doesn't mean that. But what if that's seriously why there's no Android 13 in the future? Because even without Trunks, Android 13 was going to die right now on that day because he was going to be defeated by Goku. Think about it. That would explain what he means. He doesn't mean that he's strong enough to kill him now, but even then Goku will kill him right now, today, the same way he did in his timeline. That's what Trunks means, that Android 13 has no chance of winning even in the future timeline. I know my timeline video doesn't include the events of Super Android 13 happening during that time, mostly because I didn't think of this theory by then, but this theory could make a lot of sense. There's one more, I'm sure there are two things people are going to say from the movie that might be a full disproof and that might show my theory has no weight. One being this line. This is Goku saying that it seems like the quality has decreased since the last model of androids. This plus the fact that it's shown that Android 17 and 18 killed Dr. Gero in the beginning. Most people think this is referring to them, and also that part in the beginning, which I'm going to deal with after this. But here's what I think it means. What Goku means is that he's comparing them not to Android 18 and 17, but to Android 8 and the androids he faced when he was a child. Because he was weaker and those androids mostly surpassed or equaled him in power, he's stating that these two androids, that being 14 and 15, are lower quality because they are not matching him in power. And now he hasn't seen 18 and 17 because, as I'm saying, this takes place in the time between, in the 3-year time skip to face the androids. So all I'm saying is simple. The androids is referring to saying, man, I don't want to say this, but it seems like the quality has decreased since the last ones. Man is actually Android 18 and the ones he faced as a child, not Android 17 and 18, because he never mentions them by name, which he most likely would, because if he had faced them, he would mention them. But because it seems like he hasn't, that means he hasn't faced them. In the beginning of the Super Android 13 movie, it's shown that Dr. Gero is killed by Android 17, which makes no sense, because if my theory is correct and it takes place during that 3-year time skip, it wouldn't make sense how he's dead. But here's how I think about it. You see, in this time he died, it's not shown with the remote anywhere, but the last time he died, he had the deactivation remote, meaning if they were showing this exact time, that deactivation remote should appear. I think this is what caused him to make the deactivation remote. Here's what I'm saying. So here's how it goes in my head. Dr. Gero releases them, they kill him. His computer releases Android 13, 14, and 15 to go face Goku and defeat him right there and there. And then after they are defeated by Goku, like it's shown in the movie and also in the future timeline, the computer that thinks it's Dr. Gero creates Android 20. Android 20 being its vessel, meaning it's the Android 20 thinks it's Gero, but it's actually a copy of an Android Gero. Yes. So that's Android 20 that we see is actually made by the computer to become a more physical body of Gero. Now when that Gero is killed, Android 17 and 18 are still out, so the computer still thinks they can defeat Goku. And then, before it gets a chance to rebuild Gero, they come and destroy it, meaning they never got the computer never got a chance to rebuild Gero again. And this is why Gero died in the beginning of the movie. And that's why he made the deactivation remote. The version that was recreated created the deactivation remote because he was killed by the androids. So when the computer remade him, it made him able to now, and he created the deactivation remote. But as we saw in the show, it didn't work. Oof, that's tough. It didn't work. Now, after saying that, that is for the beginning. Yes, the computer can create things because it's shown that it was the one that continued Cell. And also in this movie, it's also shown that he also completed a few of the androids with some new upgrades. And it also continued working on Cell in the future timeline as it was shown. So now I've explained. Let me explain my thoughts for the future timeline now. In the future timeline, I believe this is how it went. In age 766, it could be age 766, 65, or because those are there, but I'm going with age 766 very early. The androids, Android 18, 18 and 17, kill Dr. Gero, this one. But then because they are weaker than the future, they're weaker than the present versions, they weren't able to break down the door, or some got trapped somewhere there. And then Android 13, 14, and 15 were then released by Gero's computer to face the Z fighters. And because future Goku doesn't know there are any androids, because he never knew about the androids, because he had no Trunks in the future timeline, so Goku was chilling, and then he got attacked by Android 13, 14, and 15. With the help of the rest of the people, now including the full Z fighters, because this Goku is weaker, they were able to destroy it. And then after that, because we saw in the Future Trunks special that when Gohan was returning, Gohan was in his gi and all the people are very close. That shows that most likely a big fight might have taken place. And here's where it gets important. The reason this is important is simply, I think fighting Android 13 was what accelerated future Goku's heart virus. That's why I said it might it's most likely contrasting with another theory I made about the immune system and something, but between this one and that one, I think I don't know which one is more credible, but both are just theories, of course. So now, because he pushed himself very far, even with the Super Saiyan, when he was facing Android 13, 14, and 15, maybe this is when he discovered that future Vegeta had Super Saiyan. Because of pushing his body very much, the heart virus was accelerated when it would affect him. That's why it affected him 6 months earlier than our Goku. Because when our Goku will fight 13, which I'm going to explain after this. So first let me finish. So in the future timeline, he faced Android 13, 14, and 15. He discovered future Vegeta had Super Saiyan, but he was pushed extremely because he was weaker than he was weaker because he never trained for the androids. After being pushed immediately, he killed future android 13. A few months later, after starting to train a little bit, because he realized the Red Ribbon Army might be a threat, and there might be more, because they said they are 13, 14, and 15, so there might be less, or more androids. They start training. But because of how much he pushed himself to fight 13, because of how weaker he was in this timeline, the heart virus affected him earlier, and without a cure, he ended up dying. And then Trunks heard about this. That's how I will segue into the present. Now, for the present version of these events is the movie Super Android 13. So the version of the androids there are then killed Jero, and then because they are still not as strong as they would be when they are released a second time, they weren't able to escape the door. And then when 13, 14, and 15 were released by the computer to fight Goku, and because our Goku was way leagues stronger than future Goku at this time, because of training for those years, he was able to beat them easier. Okay, I wouldn't say it's easy. It wasn't easy. It was a very difficult battle, but it was most likely an easier victory for him than it was for future Goku. And then when the computer saw that that Goku was stronger than they expected him to be, because now they didn't know he was training, but because they saw him, he was stronger. When the computer rebuilt Jero as Android 20 again, because he was already an android when he was killed in this movie, but when he came back as another Android 20 again, the computer also made the Android 17 and 18 stronger, because they saw when he was facing 13, 14, and 15 that Goku was stronger, and all the other ones were also stronger than they were expected to be. Meaning the reason Trunks later says that the future androids were weaker than the present androids is most likely because in this time they saw that Goku was stronger, meaning they raised the power level of the androids. That's why the present androids are stronger than the future androids. This might explain why that happened. So the movie is the present versions of Android 13, so I don't think I'll need to explain it that much. The reason Android 17 and 18 were trapped is simply because it took a Super Saiyan Trunks after returning to the past to break down the door, and these weaker androids were not equal to the Super Saiyan Trunks who broke down the door, mostly because it was already damaged a little from another attacks, meaning without a lot of damage it would take them along, or they wouldn't. And most likely when they were trying to break down the door, before they did it, that's when the computer off screen in both parts created the remote to stop them. That's why they got trapped, and then they continued. So this is my theory about Super Android 13 in the future. Like, share, and subscribe, and come again to watch another video from Super Max Z. This is Super Max Z heading out.